Hi, I'm Zach, and today we're going to talk about utilities and internet and how some of this information gets used within the property management industry, as well as an overview of how to use Utility Profit and get trained on some of the in and outs of how the tool works. So, at a bird's eye view, just want to tell you what Utility Profit is and how it gets used. So, it is a centralized hub that gives tenants information about what are the utilities for each one of their addresses, and then tells them where to go to set up the essential services for all that. The tool is white labeled for property managers and is a completely free to use tool. And it actually generates some revenue for the company as some of the internet companies and utility companies actually give a portion of the money to the property managers. So my background is I'm the president and co-founder of Utility Profit. Before this, I had been leasing homes through a company called Sunroom. And with that business, we had partnered with Real Estate Investment Trust and property managers to do all of the leasing operations of leasing homes. So all the stuff involved with going to the homes, taking photos, and getting data about those properties, listing them online, and then doing all the back office to screen the applicants and ultimately getting a great tenant for the home. So we built software for that, quite a bit of software. And through that company, I learned a lot about the move-in process, and thus learned that a lot of property managers were having troubles with the utility setup section of their operation. Before that company, had done a on-demand food delivery company that had scaled up to having about 50,000 delivery drivers, mostly in Texas. We would deliver common items like tacos and groceries and that type of thing. And we had sold that company about 6 or 7 years ago. At which point we started working on that company I just explained. Um, so excited to talk to you about how the utility industry works today and some of the in and outs of it. So I think it's when I say utilities, what are the actual services we're talking about? So there's a couple here. So what is the electric, uh, the gas, water, and sewer? So today, there's no database that actually has the list of the companies that are servicing that particular utility. There's no place where you could say, okay, where do I go to get gas? Right now, sometimes the owner of the home might have this information, or maybe it was saved on the multiple listing service, or potentially like you might be able to find it if you are Googling around. But even then, you might not actually have the right one, and you might have to call a bunch of places to verify that they even service the home. And then even inside of this, so there's a couple of things that you should know about this industry. So for one, electric within most states, it's a regulated market, meaning that it's all done by state or city municipalities. There's a couple states that are an exception to that, Texas being one, which are what are called deregulated markets. These are markets that actually have a lot of different companies that are competing for business to get the customers for electricity. And then kind of going next on the list. So gas is a utility that a home might be wired for gas, or sometimes it's not wired for gas. There's not a great way to know whether or not um, uh, uh, this is part of the setup unless you're looking at the lease, because a home might be within a company's gas service area, although that house might not be wired up specifically for that gas. And normally the best way to know is to get some of the data about the home from when the home was initially sold. Um, Water is an interesting utility. So water, like electric, is regulated within most markets. Um, there's certain places where water is very, very localized, where there might have been sub communities that were built and set up for a specific water. Um, and those things might be down to the neighborhood level or the street level. So this one, there's a lot of complications when people go to set up water services, because there's so many different companies that or localized providers that might be serving up that water for the home. Um, SOAR is something that's interesting. So in a lot of places, SOAR gets included within the utility um, through either their water service or sometimes even the electric. It's just built right into the package that they select. But some states, this is a standalone service that has to get set up, and it just kind of differs by region. So that's the background on utilities. So let's talk about internet for a second. So, internet, there's a couple different technologies that exist. So, there's fiber and cable. These are the most standard things that gets used. So, cable was the old technology that people used to use. Um, a lot of the country has now been wired up for fiber. About half of the houses have been wired to fiber. There's actually a big federal program a couple of years ago to get fiber in a lot of the more rural areas in the middle of the country, because before that, fiber usually just existed in the densely populated metropolitan areas and not really the whole middle of the country. Um, Fiber's kind of the most popular option now. It's the fastest, and the cost of it has came down quite a bit. So a lot of people go with that. There's a couple of locations that are actually not wired up for fiber yet, and so tenants typically set up satellite for that. Um, a lot of these telecom companies have been trying to make a push to have something called 5G get set up, but 5G today is normally just set up for big metropolitan areas, and in those locations, you normally already have fiber set up. These companies are making a push to have 5G set up because they're able to use some of their cell phone tower infrastructure to be able to just offer up the service to people without having to wire up each individual house for that line. So something else to know about the internet space is internet in a lot of states, there's multiple providers. Um, but there's normally not a ton of providers. There's typically a situation where there's 2 to 4 providers that are competing for that business, and then there's some states that actually have, like the Northeast is where I grew up, and Comcast was very heavy up there. It was almost a total monopoly where they were the only show in town. But then a lot of the other main places in the country, they might have an internet company that is the dominant player, but they'll have multiple companies that are competing to get customers in those places. So there's a couple different things that get used by people when they're setting up internet service when considering which plan to select. So the main one and the most obvious one is just whether or not the home is coveraged. Not every company or plan is offered by homes, and you might even be wired up to have a certain company, but they might not have the exact plan or speed available for the house. Price is obviously a big factor, and then something that often is an important selection is the contract terms. So, is there a cancellation fee? How long is the contract, or how long will that price even get locked in at? And these are all variables that tenants use when they're kind of considering which things. And then last up on the list, installation cost. So sometimes the home's already wired up. Other times it's not yet wired up, and it actually needs a technician to go to the home and lay the wire down from the pole to the house. Sometimes certain providers actually charge money to have that happen, and other times it's complimentary. Um, the two different kind of options within this installation uh, are called like a pro setup or self install, where a box within self install, a box is actually shipped to the house, has um, the modem, and that gets connected to the wall, and it's good to go. It's good to get live. Other times the technician has to go and help set things up. So that's a quick overview on internet plans and how they work. Um, Something to know too is the way that multifamily industry and single family home industry works is a little bit different. Uh, Apartments a lot of times get wired up for one internet company, and oftentimes they might get wired up with one direct meter line for their electric or their water. It varies a little bit. Sometimes you have the ability to go direct to the utility provider to set that stuff up. But a lot of times within big box multifamily, there'll be a single service provider for that place, and then the property manager at the apartment will figure out the amount of money that's owed each time by doing prorated math to figure out your square footage and then how much consumption you were relative to the other tenants at the building, and then send a bill or have it included within the rent. Homes are different. Homes are typically set up within the tenant's name, and they are setting up that service. It hasn't been predetermined that the whole building's going to be on something. And inside of homes, there's kind of two different types of setups, actually. I said it's tenants, and it's mostly tenants' name. Some bigger real estate investment trusts will actually set the utilities up within their name. But for the average individual landlord or the average property manager, it's typically in the tenant's name for the whole duration of the lease. If you kind of think about the whole lease cycle too, so the tenants will set the service up at the time that they move into the property. So it's at the very beginning of the lease, typically right after the approval section, and it will be in the tenant's name all the way through the duration of the lease. And then as the lease is ending, and the home is becoming vacant, it typically goes in either the owner investor's name for the home, or it will go into the property manager's name until a new tenant comes in, and then will get switched over to the tenant. Okay, so that was a good background on just the general things for utilities. I'll talk about how these things apply directly to Utility Profit and how to use some of the software. So let's dive into that now. Okay, so from a high level, Utility Profit is a place to get these services set up. It's a directory of what is offered for that home, and then a way for the tenants to use a branded website to set up these services, and then give property managers confirmation that they've been set up so that there's a smooth move-in day. Because if the tenant doesn't set up the services and just moves into the home, a couple things can happen. The first thing is that if the landlord or the property manager turned off the utilities, there's a chance that maybe you're in a cold place, the pipes might freeze, or maybe the services weren't set up in time, and the owner had to keep paying for those services, and it wasn't clear to switch over. That can also create problems because then the owner of the home will have to get money from the tenant, and you'll have to do prorated math to figure out how much money is owed. So it's just a pain if it wasn't set up at the time that the tenant moved in. And so property managers typically want to see confirmation that it was set up. Today, a lot of that is getting done over email by sending screenshots of those account IDs and that it was in the tenant's name and which company it was set up with. Our system had put that into a portal and then also handles all of the nudges to tenants to make sure that they've set that up, they've put it in it the right way, and then gives an overview of what services were set up and when. I'll show you how it works for renters. So there's two ways that renters find out where to type in this information. The first way is by updating the move-in template emails. So we give a custom link that's specific for your portfolio, and you use this link and you type it in here. You can see it. It gives some instruction of why the tenant has to do this and where to go for it, and then has a link. And you want to update this where you're talking about utilities today. So this might be the approval email that you send out. It could be the move-in instruction email that you can send out. Kind of want to be in a couple different places within the flow. And then the second way that we can get it integrated on your site is through something called the property management integration. So there's a way that I can get through and explain it a little bit, but we're able to connect with your property management software create a report that says who are the tenants that were recently approved, and then automatically send them an email to tell them where to go to set up the internet services and utilities. This is what it will look like for tenants once they click that link. So it will tell them that they need to do this before getting the keys to the property, and will give a section for the internet, electricity, water, gas, trash, and sewer. And when they click into each one of these, for instance, we're looking at a view of electricity here. It will give a drop down of all of the potential options for the property, and then instruct the tenant to save what their ID was. And then once they've done it, it will clear it off as one of the items that was completed. And they'll do this for all of the services that they have to get set up. There's some chat functionality, so if the tenant has any questions about this, um, they can text with us and we can help resolve whatever issue. Then you'll notice that there's a dashboard here that will display all of the details that we just collected on that last screen from the tenant. So in this portal, you can see the whole portfolio of homes, the date that it was ingested into the system, when the lease start dates, and then each one of the services. And then you'll see that there's an orange clock if that service has not yet been set up, and then a green check mark if it was completed. And then if you were to click into any of those, for instance, looks like we had clicked into one of these addresses, it will have an account ID, a activation date, and it will have it for each one of the service with all the confirmation details. And on this page, you'll see that this is the link you can use that's for tenants to go and search for their home and get connected with that property. Next, you'll see that there's a summary of the money that's been paid out to you for tenants setting up services. This section here, utility activations, gives the bird's eye view of what services have been set up so far, who the tenants are, as well as their dates, and then ability to click in and see some of the details of these. If a tenant ends up not leasing the property, you can delete that utility activation by clicking this red button. This section here called synced listings is a way for you to see all of the addresses that have automatically been added to your platform. We do this by connecting with your website, and anytime you're advertising a home for rent, we're able to notice that and get it brought into this product and then map these services for you. You have the ability to edit which ones you want to have turned on. So, for example, maybe you have electricity included in rent. You could disable that service by clicking edit and then clicking disable. Similarly, maybe gas doesn't exist at this home and you want to disable it. Same thing, you can click edit and disable that. Maybe we've mapped one of these services, but you have a different provider that you would like to use. Click add provider and then add that provider, and it will override the one that's currently attached. And then last up, you can request that additional documentation is given to tenants. For example, they might have something in particular that they need to see to set up these utilities, so you could add that document here. And then we'll know if a property was taken off your website but was not actually leased, and it will show up inside of this recently unleased section. And that helps to keep track of whether or not the home needed to have these services set up before it was withdrawn. And then, as I mentioned before, so this as services are set up, this actually will turn into revenue for the property manager, and the property manager can cash this out at any time, and then have it sent right into their bank account. Right now, we're actually running a promotion where if you are a new customer for Utility Profit and you start implementing this tool at your property management company, you'll actually get $100 just for creating an account. and that will go directly to you. The way we see it, you're on the front line using these tools every day. You should get the credit for bringing it to your company and presenting this as something that you guys want to use. There's a couple details for the campaign. It's any new account between April and August of 2024, and it's only for new customers, and you have to have at least 100 homes or more to qualify. Thanks so much for taking some time to learn about utilities with me today. Good luck on taking your test and getting certified in Utility Profit, and we look forward to being able to work with you soon. Thanks so much.